Jean-Luc Ayoun. Neurosciences, continued. Agapè binder, let yourself. Part 6. October 12, 2020. So first of all, a big thank you to Christina for everything she has deployed. There you go. I would like to both complete, and for Christina herself, add two very short elements. So as of course, Agapè as a company presented raw, it can't pass. On the other hand, in the software and the techniques that I have developed, in group coaching in particular, I don't talk about empathy, compassion and so on, but there is something that is understandable by everyone which is a starting point, and that word is benevolence. The second thing is something that we've been hearing systematically since 2012. People are wondering why we make plans. We can make projects regardless of the final scenario, and sometimes, without asking for anything, there are projects that come to us. To let be what is, to let life flow, is also to be available for what comes up in human life. It goes very, very far. When you're available, you welcome what presents itself, and in particular with regard to the notion of project, you must already accept that those who are in the natural state do not hold on to their projects. There's no attachment. We are available for time zero, but we are also available to finish, to complete the dream that is in progress. As I said, it is better that it is a dream than a nightmare. The project is not a projection out of the present instant, and in any case, if you're listening beyond any reflection, beyond any decision, the toolkitity is self-evident. So, talking about tomorrow does not mean that we are fooled by tomorrow, but that we continue, as Christina said, what we love. You know, all my life I have accumulated knowledge, but at no time has this knowledge been an obstacle to freedom. Because I love it and I don't see why, even if it was the end tomorrow, why I wouldn't let the dream appear, because I know it's a dream anyway. And again, without holding on to the dream, it's better to dream than to have nightmares, isn't it? So with those two things said, I will finish my satsang this morning, and from 8 o'clock, in 3/4 of an hour, I will leave the place to Agapè. And for the moment, then, we'll pick up where we left off this morning. I have tried to show you that whatever we think we choose, whatever we decide, does not come from our will or our thoughts. In other words, as Biddy said, whatever must happen will happen no matter what you do. Whatever must not happen, will not happen no matter what you do. This is far from being a defeatism or negative vision, but it is precisely that which makes you available and which will allow the intelligence of the real, of the light, to manifest in your dream the most pleasant things. And, I repeat, we're not fooled. Having said that, to complete a little about what Christina said, I now come back to, well, we still had to see, to complete the data of the psychiatrist Robert Cloninger. I was talking this morning about the psychobiological map of the personality with the different primary behaviors, the 81 because there are 81 types of temperaments. But now, since the advances in understanding and imaging of emotional intelligence, Dr. Cloninger has demonstrated what was even more important than the person. It was 3 new criteria that were necessary and sufficient to be well at all levels of well-being. So we call these 3 criteria. The first one is cooperation. Translator. There was a cut-off, Jean-Luc. Cooperation, which is the first criterion. Cooperation is simply the ability to establish harmonious social relations. That's where benevolence comes in, which is also what Christina was saying. We're human beings. There's no one above, no one below, even within the company. This cooperation is essential, and it is one of the criteria in terms of what is happening on Earth at the moment, which has been shattered by their manipulation. The second criterion is called persistence. It is the ability to maintain clearly in the mind a precise objective. One joins there the notion of project which I evoked before, and a future which belongs to the dream. The third criterion is certainly, according to Cloninger and in my experience, what Cloninger called transcendence. It is not spirituality. Transcendence being defined here as the capacity to represent one's place in the universe. I'm not saying to be well, but to be able to represent one's place. If these three criteria are present, whether at the level of the individual, the groups, or a professional aspect, then the transformations are real. All coaching and accompaniment techniques are a state of resonance, of adequacy, of adjustment between the one who speaks or who emits ideas and the one who receives them or the group that receives them. So beyond these three essential criteria, cooperation, persistence and transcendence, and independently of everything I have been able to tell you about the three brains this morning, the most important things, and here we reach all the decision-making aspects, all the environmental aspects in the broad sense and all the intimate aspects of the self. Every human being who is born on this planet, apparently until adulthood, until death, the vast majority of human beings are affected by extremely precise brain circuits that we would have called the reward circuit and the punishment circuit. It is a single axon. Translator. What is an axon? Nerve fiber. Nerve fiber. There's a single nerve fiber that starts from the central computer in the middle of the skull, the seat of memory, the seat of the illusory feeling of individuality. Translator. Illusion of what? What? Translator. Illusory of what? Illusory meaning, individuality. Okay. Yes, individuality. The feeling of being someone is absolutely not related to cognition but to very particular structures, so I won't go into the details of the names of the nuclei, but which are in the central thalamus. In front of the thalamus you have the pituitary gland and just behind it, above it, you have the epiphysis, the famous third eye. What we call the myth of immortality, which concerns the ego, the person, as well as the self, is simply due to your memory, to the hard disk. When you make a decision, as I already mentioned yesterday, these two circuits of reward and punishment take their information from the hard drive. You have a nerve fiber that goes from one side, which arrives on the good star, and on the other side, on the other nucleus of the thalamus, you have a single nerve fiber that also arrives in the frontal neocortex. So listen carefully to what I am telling you now. Every human being, as long as he is not awake, what I am saying here is proven by the different MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, studies, for those who like the bibliography. But hey, I don't bother with that. I tell you, you will receive a document soon. These are the works of Mr. Hackman, but it doesn't matter. So in all human beings, we're all, as long as we are not awake, subject to the inexorable duality of good and evil. Because the circuit of punishment is always more active than the circuit of reward. Always, always. We realize that certain individuals who had near-death experiences NDE, or EMI, and who had gone all the way to the end of the NDE, who had crossed the light to find themselves on the other side of the light, as well as certain authentic mystics, we realize that the circuit of reward took precedence over the circuit of punishment. Only then does the brain of the heart take over from the brain of the head. The brain of the heart connects to the brain of the belly, and at that moment, as we say in esotericism, in your name I gather the three into one. This is what we have called in energetics and vibration, the fusion of the three crowns. As long as you are submitted to the circuit of punishment, you are a negative person, submitted to the injunctions of the reptilian brain, submitted to memory, submitted to history and submitted to illusion. The reward circuit, when you're awake, will make you see life in a completely different way. You see the dream, you see the real, and, above all, you live the real while you're in the dream. These reward and punishment circuits are active all the time. There are so-called entheogens, which are not drugs, which have been studied for 20 to 30 years. So there are countless of them, WMD, MDMA, salvia divinorum in particular, a molecule that, as soon as it is injected, puts an instant end to the notion of being an individual and literally explodes the notion of being an individual, or the notion of being the self with a capital S. All this is an illusion. You can't accept it until you're awake, because your punishment circuit will tell you it is heresy. The big difference with the one who is awake is only this. I am aware that it is a dream, but I know that I am not consciousness and that I am anterior to consciousness. There's the real and nowhere else, and all these teachings of the greatest mystics of the planet are today perfectly demonstrated and unfortunately perfectly exploited by social engineering. It is very simple to activate the circuit of punishment by a single word: fear. It has been said for a long time, fear or love, the two absolutely cannot coexist, and it would be totally stupid to say that good and evil do not exist, but this is part of the dream. At that moment, your reward circuit being preponderant and in majority, the brain of the heart comes into action. At that point, if you were perceiving the energies before, you're going to feel the flow of the heart level, which is actually a bitoroidal structure, a double charis, that puts you in that state beyond unity, and that's where you can say, like all those who discover this and experience it, that it's always been there, that we were never born and we can't die. Everything I am saying to you here, in neuroscience we have demonstrated it perfectly. Instilling fear, injecting fear, is done through images, is done through cognitive dissonance, and is done through discourse, to which obviously an awakened human being can no longer be permeable, or if he is permeable it goes through him, but it is not stopped. There's freedom. Everything else is just stories. Everything else that has been called visions, the activation of the third eye, has absolutely nothing to do with the heart. It's called Luciferian illusion, the Luciferian principle that I was talking about this morning, and there you are embarked no longer in the planetary lie, but in the cosmic lie, new earth, new dimension, the only solution, because you can't do anything about what you see, you can't do anything about what you think, because none of your thoughts belong to you, it's just a combination of circumstances that you think are yours. Everything at education, the training of Vajra's dimensions of the time, at the level of history, at the level of energy, at the level of vibral and at the level of consciousness, has made it possible today, as I was saying through the seminar, to build a scaffolding, a frame of reference, and ultimately to make all frames of reference fly. This is the end of what is called the myth of immortality. At that moment, at the level of the central thalamus, at the level of this famous reptilian brain, there can no longer exist within the person as within what we are, any illusion on the notion of believing ourselves to be an individual, a history, a past or a future. The countless brothers and sisters who are already settled in Agapè, in the natural state, I assure you that we do not need a new world. I assure you that we do not need a destination. We're simply human here and now in the gift of the present instant. Everything else on the spiritual level is a cosmic lie. At this level, I totally agree with Bernard of Montreal, Nisargadatta Bernard of Montreal, except that today, unlike Bernard of Montreal Sri Aurobindo, we do not need to project ourselves into a new race, a new land or stellar origin. It's part of the scenario, of the return to truth, that's all. You see, whether we go through energy, through vibration to access a supramind, whether we go through astrophysical understanding like Asim Harriman, through neuroscience like me or others, the conclusion is the same. What you must understand is that when there is a break in the myth of immortality, whatever your age, whatever your activities, you live this love and freedom that no satisfaction and no pleasure can bring you. It is the stopping at the engine of suffering, as Eckhart Tolle says, the stopping at the engine of suffering. It is the end of the cosmic lie. There's no more devil than God. There's only you and everything is in you. Creation in its totality is you. There's no one superior. There's no one inferior. End of the myth of the masters. End of the myth of any external savior. End of the myth of any punishment. End of the myth of any defect. Really and concretely, everything is perfect and everything is in its place. This is amply demonstrated by all the architecture of the brain that I have only just flown over. These are the few things that I had to complete in relation to this morning, which are completely in line with what Christina has said so far, at least this afternoon. Remember, I will end with these words: you don't have to exclude the ephemeral, you have to include it, to let it be included in the absolute, otherwise you would be in the refusal of your life. And how do you want to find life in these conditions? There's no freedom in any scenario. There's no freedom that is situated tomorrow. At that moment you are, as I said, totally lucid, totally available. It is the natural state, the Agapè state. Then Biddy would say, you are neither this nor that. In her language neti, and I say me, when you have done the full circle, when you have completely turned to the intimate, there's also this and that. You can no longer exclude, and every element of daily life shows you this, but this will be one of the things that I will develop tomorrow in particular, and the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow I will go into a little more detail about memories and lies, about these notions of evolution and involution that have been part of the story that you have been told, and I too, in particular, to end the story, to be awakened. In the same way that all the social engineering that is being implemented today can only wake us up, in the end, ultimately, thank everything that happens, it's just passing, and it's when you see what's happening that you realize that you will never pass. So Greca, translator, it would be good if you put some light on because you're going to be in a haunted castle later on. Greca. Okay. That's it. So I'm going to ask you for 2 minutes. I'm also going to plug in the recorder in case there's a power cut, and we're going to switch to the Agapè on October 12, 2020. That's it. Translator for Christina. I'm going to take this opportunity, as I did yesterday, to wish you all already a great evening and a great night. After that we are all going to want to rest in this wonderful frequency. Thank you all. We say goodbye now. Thank you, see you tomorrow, and we'll let the word speak for itself. Through Jean-Luc Ayoun. Less Transformations. English Revised Translation, LMF.